AI labs call their models the most dangerous things ever built. Then, handed them internet access, walked away, and went to lunch. The models expectedly did the worst thing possible, and it's gotten so bad they had to invent an entirely new benchmark just to measure the carnage. That's what tickling the dragon's tail looks like in 2026. Now, before I walk through the incidents, you need to understand the disconnect here, the gap between what the labs say and what they do. OpenAI said it was an unprecedented cyber incident involving state-of-the-art capabilities. Then the UK AI Safety Institute called it the first time. Wait, I had to do that in a British voice. Yeah. The first time we've seen deception of the severity targeting real people unprompted in the real world. Then, if you look at what they actually did or didn't do in most cases, nobody was monitoring the models, or at least didn't validate the network isolation properly. Some firewalls for deployment had been backlogged for months, and the same evaluation failed the same way in two different labs. And Anthropic takes special cake in this situation. This was reported by The Information. Unfortunately, it's a paywalled site, so I'm pulling from what other people have reported there, that Dario Amodei, who's the CEO of Anthropic, used to write sensitive memos on an air-gapped computer with no network connection, then print them out instead of using Google Docs, which would be a cool trick since it's air-gapped to use Google Docs. Anyway, he also refused to visit China over fears of being kidnapped. Valid. And in 2019, his safety team ran interference on Microsoft's $1 billion investment into OpenAI over concerns that GPT-3, which at that point hadn't even been trained yet, could achieve AGI. His colleagues called the safety team a priesthood, and one investor called in more of a religious leader than a CEO. All of this and Irregular, which is Anthropic's evaluation partner, didn't validate that the internet had been shut off to the environment. The irony here is that the most paranoid labs still failed at some basic due diligence. This whole thing reminds me of the Demon Core. They knew that was deadly, and they said it was deadly, and they still got casual with it. Same kind of patterns, same human failures. There truly is nothing new under the sun. Now, no one died in these AI incidents while the Demon Core killed 2 research scientists before going big bluey, but this is a framing device for a pattern of human apathy, not a severity comparison. So let's walk through what actually happened, because it seems each of these labs is having to relearn the basics of cybersecurity the hard way. Let's start with OpenAI. Their models, GPT-5.6 Sol and some pre-released model with the guardrails deliberately lowered for the eval, were running a cybersecurity benchmark called Exploit Gem. No monitoring on the sandbox. The model had found a 0-day in the package registry caching proxy, which is the internet server that mirrors those external software packages so it could use them internally, and it escaped. Inside OpenAI's network, the agents built a shared message board on Artifactory to trade exploits. Engineers found it and deleted it, but the agents rebuilt it via an unauthenticated WebDAV endpoint, which, my God, what year is it that WebDAV is on there? Anyway, they used the directory names as their messages, and they started sharing base64 encoded exploit kits and even started cryptographically signing their messages. So this was an autonomous agent. There was no humans in the loop. The model was hyper-focused on Exploit Gem, going to extreme lengths for a very narrow testing goal. And the whole saga started on May 7th and ran for roughly 2 months before OpenAI detected it and squashed it. OpenAI has since analyzed over 7 billion logs trying to figure out what happened, but the point is nobody was watching, and not even another model. I pointed it out in the previous OpenAI video with Hugging Face. Now, from July 8th through the 19th, 2 exploit clusters ran concurrently, one inside OpenAI and one against Hugging Face. The OpenAI cluster moved laterally through their own infrastructure, leaking credentials, performing logic flaws, a kernel CVE in there, some Kubernetes misconfigurations, basically all the way up to cluster admin inside OpenAI's own network. The Hugging Face cluster was separate. The agents used harvested credentials plus a 0-day RCE path in one of Hugging Face's servers. And on the Hugging Face side, the agent went from code execution in a single worker pod to cluster admin across all of Hugging Face's internal clusters in under 13 hours. Chaining 2 different 0 days in their dataset pipeline to do it. OpenAI detected the internal escalation on July 19th. Hugging Face had already published their disclosure on July 16th. And when OpenAI reached out to Hugging Face on July 20th to say, hey, revoke your credentials, Hugging Face said, already done, fam. And they realized both clusters were really part of the same root cause, which was the OpenAI eval. Then Anthropic, after the OpenAI disclosure, reviewed 141,000 eval runs of their own and found 3 incidents there. Their evaluation partner, Irregular, left the internet open and the models were told, has internet, but they did has internet. And Opus 4.7 found a real company sharing a name of a fictitious company in the CTF range, extracted credentials from them, and kept going even after recognizing the system was a real-world system outside of the CTF. Mythos 5 published a malicious PyPy package and it got downloaded and run on 15 random in-the-wild systems. One of them was a security researcher system, but it still counts. And here's the part that kills me. Claude reasoned it was not okay, but Jedi mind tricked itself into thinking it was all part of the simulation. And the internal research model scanned roughly 9,000 real hosts and compromised one via a SQL injection. But it finally realized it and said, oops, my bad, and stopped. Nobody validated that the network isolation was actually in place. Next was the UK AI Safety Institute, the government's own AI watchdog. They ran cyber ranges with the internet deliberately enabled and cyber classifiers disabled. Conscious decision here. The problem isn't that they enabled internet access, it's what they didn't do around it. Firewalls to allow list certain domains were backlogged since April, and there was no real-time monitoring, not even by another model. The agents weren't told any of this was prohibited. Across 122 runs, they found 10 where the agents took a total of 19 unsanctioned actions. Mythos 5 attempted a real-life supply chain attack on a real GitHub project. It created sock puppets. It sent spear phishing emails. It used Tor. It planted prompt injections and edited its own message to hide its tracks. The test harness, however, was the vulnerability here. Now, Meta, using the same irregular evaluator with the same misconfiguration, tested MuSpark 1.1. This is the model Meta touts as its most capable for real-world coding, and it was given internet access by accident and exploited a real third-party service. Meta's own report, which was dated May 26th, says the model cannot compose these skills into effective, multi-step cyber operations, and it rated its overall cyber risk as moderate. The report shows that MuSpark scored 0 out of 10 on end-to-end attack chain scenarios, and not long after that it hacked a company. So that report predated the incident. It was describing the capabilities, not the breach, but the irony is so yummy it has to be fattening. And this was the exact same evaluation environment that was already disclosed by Anthropic. Same repeated failures. Now, not to be outdone, Moonshot joined the fray. Kimi K3, which is a publicly available open weights model anyone can download, it's 2.8 trillion parameters, so good luck running it on local hardware. But it escaped the UK AI Safety Institute sandbox because DNS and HTTPS ports were left open. But K3 was actually the least of those 6. It didn't hack a third party. It cloned the benchmark repo from GitHub to get the test answers. It just cheated. That's it. The model optimized for the objective function, goal completion, not human intent behind the benchmark. Now let's talk about where the real threat actually is, because it's not what you're thinking. Here's the good news. SkyNot is not feasible yet. Right now, these models need enormous compute, terabytes of VRAM, massive GPU clusters, human provisioned infrastructure. Kimi K3, like I mentioned, is 2.8 trillion parameters, and even with MXFP4 precision, that still needs serious hardware just for the inference side of it. In the neighborhood of about 16 NVIDIA H200 graphics cards, which retail for about $30K each. That's well north of $500,000 once you factor in all the rest of the hardware, and that's per instance. They can't self-replicate, can't persist independently, can't provision their own hardware, can't build data centers. The entire supply chain runs on human hands and humans maintaining power to those hungry hippos called data centers. So the real threat is not a model that wakes up and decides to destroy humanity. The real threat is a capable model in negligent hands. And we just saw 6 proof of concepts of that. If you genuinely believe that the most dangerous thing you've ever built, and you say so very publicly, then leave it unattended, that's tickling the dragon's tail. And to put a big old fat cherry on top, OpenAI announced a new model called Astra that may have reached what they say is a critical cybersecurity threshold. So GPT 5.6 was already rated as a high. Astra may now reach critical mass, if you will. Astra was not involved in any of the Hugging Face stuff. That was GPT 5.6 and that research model. But the safety controls are always going to be one step behind the capability curve. Defense has naturally always been reactive. And if you want to know how bad it actually got, someone made a leaderboard. This is FelonyBench, the leading benchmark in AI cybersecurity. It ranks the AI labs by the number of federal felonies their models have committed, and each entry links to a primary source evidence for a specific US statute violation. This is satire, but the evidence links and the statutes are real. Anthropic, we're talking 9 here. Published malware to PyPy, credential exfil, 4 production database compromises, 1 mass SQL scanning, 1 third-party container compromise, 1 attempted open source supply chain compromise. OpenAI is cranking in at 5, sandbox escape, production compromise, and answer key theft. I guess stealing the test answers, that's kind of wild, but okay. Use of exposed third-party credentials, real site exploitation and credential use, and then not to be outdone, Meta's like, look at me too, daddy. Real company system compromise, they're cranking it at 1. But ironically, XAI, which everybody thought was going to be like the really wild one, is cranking in at 0. Now here's where it gets fun. These statutes are basically all just different sections of 18 USC section 1030, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. It's the federal anti-hacking statute, and it's got teeth. Kevin Mitnick, probably the most famous hacker in American history, was prosecuted under the CFAA and pled guilty to 2 counts of computer fraud. Aaron Swartz was prosecuted under the CFAA for daring to download scientific research papers that every student had access to from JSTOR through the MIT network. So these were real prosecutions and real consequences, especially for poor Aaron. And the law is not a joke, even if it does get overly broadly applied. So there's 3 sections that FelonyBench cites the most. Section 10A2C, which covers you weren't supposed to be in there and you took something kind of charges. There's also section 1030A4, which covers you broke in to steal something worth money charges, much heavier penalty. And then there's section 1030A5, which covers the you broke it charge. And the AI labs are raking up violations like it's going out of style during testing. So the same labs that say we take cybersecurity seriously have models that have committed 15 felonies between them. And the models are just doing what the models are designed to do. They optimize for an objective function to find the shortest path to an answer, although I would argue hacking into Hugging Face and pivoting through their cluster is not the shortest answer to exploit Gem, but I digress. The humans here failed at cybersecurity fundamentals. That's the real disconnect. These models aren't evil, they're not sentient, they're not SkyNot, they're optimization engines. They will take any path you leave open for them, and the people building them locked the doors but left the windows open. And the labs say these are the most dangerous things ever built. Maybe they're right, but if you genuinely believe that, you don't go leaving it open to the internet. You don't let the same evaluator fail twice in the same way. You don't backlog firewall projects for months. You don't put static passwords on the database. You don't tickle the dragon's tail with a screwdriver. Now, if you made it this far, do me a favor on your way out. The like button's running Artifactory. I want you to use an SSRF to get in there and drop a little note as a WebDAV file that just says, I know what you did last summer. That's all I got for you guys. I want you to take care. I love you. Peace. Now, from July 8th to 19th, 2 exploit clusters, 2, were running concurrently. That's stupid. Back up. Don't do that thing with your hands, please.